Hello and welcome to the Malika Writes channel. My name is Malika Writes and today I want to start off this discussion with Aragorn's motivational speech in front of the gates of Mordor. Just to set the scene, the men are weary. They've just fought a battle at Minas Tirith and they have now come before the gates of Mordor to engage the remaining host of Sauron in order to give Frodo a chance to get rid of the ring in the fires of Mount Doom. The gates of Mordor open and legions of orcs just pour out of Mordor. It looks like a hopeless fight. They cannot hope to defeat this army. And logically that makes sense. They are outnumbered, they are weary from riding, they have not stopped to rest. They know this is a last-ditch effort in order to give Frodo the chance he needs to destroy the ring. Aragorn comes riding back towards his men, shouting, "Hold your ground." He knows they are terrified and have every right to be, but the command is to stand firm. So let's look at that for a second. Hold your ground. That's responsibility. Sure, it's an order to stand firm and not run away, but it's not that simple. Hold your ground. This position is your responsibility and you cannot give way. It's putting power back into the hands of the soldiers, and I came to this conclusion because of what Aragorn says next. "Sons of Gondor, of Rohan, my brothers." Aragorn is their king, but death is a great equalizer, and all things considered, they're going to their deaths. He doesn't order them to battle like a tyrant, he elevates them, reminds them that they have a choice. "I see in your eyes the same fear that would take the heart of me." He acknowledges their fear and the magnitude of it. Aragorn has gone through a lot. He's seen many battles, he's fought in them, he's gone through so much. He's been a ranger in the wild for many years of his life. And when you know his backstory, it makes that statement all the more pronounced. It is not unwarranted, their fear. There is a very real threat in front of them. Death is very real and very likely. So it's not about undermining the threat to make them feel better. There is a real threat in front of them. There's something that they have to contend with that will take everything from them. "A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day, an hour of wolves and shattered shields when the age of men comes crashing down. But it is not this day. This day we fight." Aragorn presents each and every man in the army with a choice. He presents the choices. The courage of men can fail. They can forsake their friends and break all bonds of fellowship. The wargs of the orcs can come, and with their defeat, the age of men can come to an end. Or they can fight. They can hold their ground. "By all that you hold dear on this good earth, I bid you stand, men of the West." Even at the end of the speech, he does not order them. He bids them to stand, and when you bid someone to do something, you are asking them. It's not an order or command. The choice is still theirs. Will they stand or will they flee? We all have choices, and we must all live with the consequences of our choices. The freedom to choose also comes with the freedom to bear the consequences of your choices. And I want to draw your attention to another speech. This is a speech that we'll use to contrast and sort of carry on with this conversation. This next speech occurs before the Battle of Helms Deep. Theoden stands in the light of a doorway. He seems very lost in thought. As the armies of Saruman march towards Helms Deep, Theoden gives this rather hopeless speech. "Where is the horse and the rider? Where is the horn that was blowing? They have passed like rain on the mountains, like wind in the meadow. The days have come down in the west, behind the hills into shadow. How did it come to this?" What is missing in these two speeches? Based on the battles, I would say that men are missing. In the Battle of Helms Deep, the riders of Rohan have, for the most part, rode away with Ymir, and they are severely outnumbered at Helms Deep. In the battle before the gates of Mordor, they arrive with a lessened and weary host. They've just fought a battle at Minas Tirith. A lot of them are injured, a lot of them have gone through this enormous battle. They don't want to do this. They know they are outnumbered, they know there's no way they can win. The two battles are very similar, but one is hopeful and the other is not. And I think in today's age, we are asking the same question that Theoden is asking. Where are the men? How did society get to the way that it is? In Theoden's speech, he's asking for men to stand up and to fight, but the tone is hopeless. He does not see a way forward. He does not see, because what he has at his arsenal, what he has available to him are young boys and men too old to fight. He's asking, where are the young men who can fight? It seems in this day and age that we are prone to looking back at this hypothetical heyday where masculinity was praised and needed. In today's age, it seems that the threat against men is unlike anything we have ever faced. But similar to the way that Sauron's threat is just... Sauron is not a new evil. He served under Morgoth, who was a greater evil. So, in that sense, I would also say that the attack on men is an age-old problem. And this is why I say this. War has traditionally been the attack on men. It took many lives, it left society in ruins, women and children suffered, and young boys grew up without fathers. When we look at our myths and tales, how many fathers did you see around in those stories? Widows' sons were sent to their uncles to become apprentices. The absent father is a reoccurring thing because in the past, war took men away. Hunting trips ended in death. Things happened that ensured that fathers who would bear the brunt of the violence were away. The archetype of the long-suffering wife waiting for her husband to return is one of the oldest archetypes that we have, and it's a universal archetype. In our archetypal stories, boys must wrestle with the red knight of masculinity precisely because they have not been introduced to it by their fathers. The brotherhood was a substitute for the father figure, and boys were introduced to guilds of men because the life of a man was often short. Cities and the rise of complex civilization gave men a chance to live longer, but order must always contend with the ever-present chaos, and so this attack on men would just change form. In ancient times, the woolly mammoth, which would most likely crush a man during a hunting trip, simply became an army of opposing men ready to fight a war. When times moved on, that army of men simply became a tyrant that would take advantage of the established order and oppress the population. We have several examples of this in human history. There has always been an attack on men. As the bigger, faster, and stronger of our species, men have borne the brunt of violence and have died for it. there's always been an attack on men. Those broad shoulders are not broad for no reason. So why is modern masculinity specifically in crisis? Like I said, the mammoth became an opposing army. That army became a tyrant who took advantage of the established order, and that tyrant has shapeshifted in a modern age into an ideology. In the modern age, most men do not have to go to war if they do not want to. Especially in the West, many men can purchase food from a supermarket, so the chance of you being killed by an animal is fairly slim. And men can vote, so if a tyrant comes into power, there are systems in place in order to ensure that that threat can be neutralized in a sort of pacifist way. So with the physical risks to men at their lowest ever in human history, the only thing left to attack is the mind. That is the war that modern men face. And modern masculinity is in crisis because men are not choosing to stand. And so we are singing the hopeless song that Theoden was singing in his speech. We are asking, where are the men of fighting age? And this is not to undermine the struggle. This is not to undermine the opposition, because the opposition is great. The ideology curses you. It finds flaw in everything that you do. It calls you toxic. It calls you misogynistic. Everything that you do is criticized and damned. So the war is not a physical one. It's a mental war. I have often said in my videos that masculinity is a driving force, one of action. So it seems to me that if an ideology comes up that says masculinity can only bring chaos, the appropriate counterattack would be to use masculinity to bring peace and order. The battle today is about holding your ground. Standing firm in your masculinity is how you defeat this ideology. When an ideology comes about, what do? We look for ways to either prove it correct or prove it wrong. And if we have examples of masculine men pushing forward in society and making it better, then we have evidence against an ideology that criticizes masculinity and calls it evil. You cannot beat darkness with more darkness, slander with more slander, and aggression with more aggression. You will only create an endless cycle. From my observation of history and the present day, the difference between the past and the modern day is that men decided to stand, to hold their ground. And perhaps that was because the attack was more in your face. Perhaps it was because when a war came to your doorstep, the threat of death was a lot more prominent. But if we look at the statistics of male self-inflicted deaths and their reported causes, I would argue that the outcome of these battles is exactly the same. We are still losing men. The stakes are still the same. You may have seen the news echo this sentiment. Men down, women most affected. And that is because when the men of a society have thrown down their shields and broken all bonds of fellowship and gone their own way and all that sort, civilizations full of women and children burn. Contrary to popular belief, women have always worked. Very few civilizations could afford a fully grown adult who didn't bring in some form of income, which is why the community was very important, because women would look after children in groups. So you would have a group of women with children just around them so that they could keep an eye on them. But in the time that they were working in groups, they would be doing their house, maintaining the house, but they would also be doing things that they could sell at the market. They would be weaving, making tents, doing all sorts of things that could give them extra income, because what happens when the men go to war, people still need to eat. Grain needs to be turned into flour so it can be made into bread. These were sort of the things that women did. Society needed to run. When men were in the fields with sheep or looking after flock or at war, like I've mentioned before, society needed to keep running forward. So women have always worked. So the fact that modern women have paid jobs, I do not think is a turning point in history, by my estimation. It's definitely a contributing factor. I'm not going to take that away from it. It's a very important contributing factor, but I do not think it has anything to do with why modern masculinity is in crisis, because unlike most people portray it, the past did not begin in the 1950s. The modern masculinity is in crisis because men are not standing up for masculinity. The conversation around OnlyFans is proof of this. Not one man in a YouTube comment section agrees with that platform, yet people continue to make millions on it. You claim to despise the behaviour, but you endorse it. So that shows that in our modern age, men lack discipline, diligence, and integrity. All the values that we find in Boromir, Faramir, and Aragorn, in all the heroes that we admire. Gone are the days where we needed men to defend us in the streets. We have an organised police force for that. Society has been built up in such a way that we do not need men to risk their lives on a daily basis anymore. We have achieved that, and that is a good thing. But the battle, the attack on men is still present, and it's not going away. It's been there since the dawn of human civilization, and it will be there until the very end. So I would say stop longing for the good old days, because they didn't exist. The only difference was that men stood up and they did what they needed to do. Society doesn't need you to be warriors in the sense that you can fight a man for a woman, or you can beat up every guy in the street. That's not what society needs. What society needs is for men to be the best men they can be. So focus on the battle for today, because the battle that you face is not a physical one, it's a mental one. Just a few weeks ago, The Guardian reported that male self-inflicted deaths hit a 2-decade high in England and Wales alone. The stakes are what they have always been: your lives and society at large. So I think the only thing left to say to end this video is that for all you hold dear on this good earth, I bid you stand, men of the West. Thank you very much for watching this video. I look forward to your conversations in the comment section, and yes, thank you so much. I hope you have a lovely day. This has been the Malika Writes channel.